Hi, this is Mr. Cordes, and today, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go over and review The Death of Ivan Ilyich, chapters 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. We've concluded the novel, we've come to an end, we've seen how his illness has progressed and the stages of death that he's gone through. This video is going to help you just identify some key points in each of the chapters. As you notice, the chapters get shorter and shorter and shorter because the time within the chapters becomes shorter and shorter as well. So you get the idea that as he progresses towards death, we go from weeks to days to hours to minutes. And so Tolstoy really kind of picks up the pace in these last sections of the novel. If you are looking at your chart, your annotation chart or your annotation guide, you will notice that there's lots of sickness and death. That's one of the biggest things that comes within these last couple chapters simply because he approaches death rather quickly. He does, in the same capacity, begin to go through these last two stages. So in chapters 8, 9, and kind of 10, these stages of death really bleed into each other anyway. It's not like you stop one and you go on to the next. But we really see him beginning to focus in, like he gets sad, he gets depressed, he kind of loses hope, but then he accepts death. And we see that towards the end in chapters kind of like 10, 11, and 12, obviously 11 and 12, when he passes. But these are great chapters. If you look at the beginning of chapter 8, there's this idea that the hateful death, which was the only reality, was now some falsity. So the idea of death, the idea of who he is still not relevant, but it's right in front of his face, and he has to come to that realization. As we progress through, I'm again looking here at my notes, my annotated text. Chapter 8 kind of breaks down his relationship with his wife, how he views her, and how their interaction is just completely dead. No pun intended for that one. But his friend Peter is there, who tries to comfort him. They do an attempt. At this point, you really see Ivan's difference in his propriety. He is now noticing other people's sense of propriety compared to his own. As he sits there and he gets closer to death, he then kind of sees in others how they drop their values and their ideas and their beliefs in order to conform to society. So he's watching his coworkers, he's watching his family really just not value the important things in life. And these are the moments in chapters 8 and 9 where he's actually beginning to realize what matters. Gerasim is the one who helps him understand that. As we progress through chapter 8, we see the conflict with his wife. Sick people are always like that. She's just kind of annoyed. I think it's either this chapter or the next where she complains about hearing him cough and moan and groan in pain from like 3 doors down or whatever. And it keeps her up at night. So she's very agitated. And again, us as readers are holding tight to Ivan, right? We've got the omniscient limited narrator who stays with Ivan, and we begin to see people in a different light because now we are with Ivan, and Ivan is changing. Okay. As we progress through, we still see references to Gerasim. These are the concepts of him offering comfort, offering him some sort of relief to his pain. Okay. They bring in the doctor again. The doctor is kind of announcing that this is inevitable. As you progress through and you see, as twilight came to be, the dinner, it's hard for him to eat. He's getting extremely sick, or sicker, perhaps I should say. And then we venture into chapter 9. Okay. His wife just doesn't care anymore, and that's pretty apparent. We can see that there is like this sense of drug use. Now, before we look and like, oh, Ivan's addicted to his drugs now, the drugs do a substantial amount. However, they don't alleviate the pain completely. And they also help him to let down his guard enough so that he is able to reevaluate his morals and his sense of propriety. So he is able then to finally relax and be like, wow, I shouldn't have to conform to these conventional standards. I shouldn't have to do what these other people say. So it's almost like this. It's almost like a detox for him from life so that he can readjust and see what's important. And it's interesting because Jerisim is alongside him in chapter 9 to help guide and offer more insight. So it talks about Jerisim sitting with him. As frustrated as Ivan is, he tells him to go away. Why has God blessed you? What is the cruelty of God? This whole morality thing comes in chapter 9. What is it for? Why am I here? What's my purpose? This is kind of when he's almost playing out to God in these moments as he is approaching. He kind of reviews his life and the things that he did. This, for us as readers, gives us a reflective nature of how do I actually approach life? Will I get to my deathbed and have regrets or be thankful for what I did do? Did I have good relationships, right? Now he says right here at the bottom of page 49, and now it is all done and there is only death. He's realizing he can't go back and change anything, right? We all cannot go back and fix our mistakes or change our mistakes, but we have to accept them and then be able to like essentially forgive ourselves and move forward. In chapter 9, let me see here. There's this whole idea of just him contemplating life. Right down here. Oh, I just passed it. The idea there was confusion and still what was good later on, his marriage, a mere accident. He's talking about his things in his life. And he's kind of, I hit it already. The idea of, I can't change anything and death is the only thing that's here. The line that I wanted to show you, which I'm looking for right now, is this part where he should have lived, right? That is all resulted from his not having lived as he ought to have done. So he's coming into the idea of regret. He's coming into the idea of, wow, I really didn't live the life that I should have. My morals were completely skewed from what I wanted. I gave up my values and my beliefs in order to appease other people, right? And he sees all of that through Jerisim, as well as how death is quickly approaching. If he wasn't hurt, and this was the story called The Life of Ivan Ilyich, we would just see him going on this destructive path. So looking here, this right here, actually, let me do one more screen change. This, a lot of the bargaining kind of comes into play here because he is almost having conversations with God. However, more than likely, this is him moving into acceptance. So part of the depression part is to question, to ask, to pull yourself out and to wonder why and what's the purpose. The acceptance part is what moves him, is what continues to move him. Okay. So as we progress into chapter 10, talks about another fortnight. There is lots of themes in this chapter about loneliness. He talks about how he's lonely. His family's not there. Again, in the midst of loneliness, he's seeing all these people around him, realizing that he doesn't actually have quality friends. When we progress to the next chapter, chapter 11, he's getting to the point like, let me die in peace. His medicine is not working anymore. His body is essentially shutting down. You can see here that there's the mental sufferings as well. His mental sufferings were due to the fact that at night he looked at Gerasim's sleeping, good-natured face and the prominent cheekbones. The question suddenly occurred to him, what if my whole life has been wrong? So Gerasim now, because Ivan is getting closer to death, Gerasim is now staying in the room. He's got a cot off to the side. That way he can be there if anything happens, kind of like a 24-hour nurse if you were in the hospital or the ICU. But for this, Ivan looks over at Gerasim and just kind of sees this, unwithered, restful butler who's a butler of a butler, and just wonders to himself, did I live my life as I should have? And he looks at and it says his mental sufferings, because that's it's kind of like when you lay in bed and your mind races and you just can't stop thinking, and you just kind of go down this rabbit hole of questions and regrets and thoughts and all these other things. That's what's happening for him. And so he looks over and he sees, has my entire life has really been wrong? Okay. He comes to that conclusion right there where he realizes, did I live the life that I should have? So in this, let me see. He continues on. He's coughing. Let's see. To relieve the doubt and consequences of his suffering. Let me find that part right there. Afterwards, when the case, his wife goes conventional. The falsity, the physical suffering sprang up. There we go. And the suffering of consciousness was unavoidable, approaching the end. Everything is suffocating. He is getting to the point where it is all consuming. And because it is all consuming, he drifts into that acceptance. So right here at the end of this chapter, we see him kind of actually accept it and be like, okay, yes, yes, I'm ready for death. He's shouting into the unknown about like, go away and leave me alone, as like a plea, almost going back to that bargaining phase. But at this point, he's on his way out. As you look in chapter 12, look at the beginning part of chapter 12. From that moment, the screaming began and continued for 3 days and was so terrible that one could not hear it through two closed doors without horror. So he has now been screaming in pain and agony for 3 days. Everyone is just so kind of tired of it. They want him to die. I know that sounds horrible, but they want him to just kind of be out and be done with his suffering. So he struggled with the man, and this is the chapter where he does pass. You see that he has these last conversations. At this moment, he fell through and caught sight of the light. At this moment, he's kind of what we would call going in and out of consciousness. So I don't know if you've been around people who have died or experienced a loved one who has passed and have been there with them, like in the hospital or in their bedroom or wherever. But to be next to them and kind of watch them, because they'll drift out and their body slowly shuts down. And then sometimes, they'll not come back from the dead, but just kind of the heart rate will go back up, and it kind of wavers until the body kind of finally just passes. And so he thought, let me see here, besides, why am I speaking? I must act. And suddenly it grew clear to him what was oppressing him. He's again in his mind, what has become of it? Where are you, pain? And death, where is it? So this is now the full, complete acceptance. Bring on death, right? Where is it? What death? There's no sight. What joy. And it begins to talk about death is finished. He said to himself, it is no more. He drew in a breath, stopped in the midst of a sigh, stretched out, and died. Now, these are the last moments. This is all Ivan, because he is contemplating wrestling. We are at the complete acceptance phase right now. We see on our annotations that death, completely encompasses him. The morality and propriety aren't necessarily extremely strong here, but we do see him kind of saying, like, the acceptance is like, this is what's right. This is what has to happen. I have to die. We see kind of his reaction with his family at the beginning of the chapter because they're so annoyed that he's been crying out and in pain for so long. But we really get this kind of, and he dies. Now, and that concludes our book. However, if you noticed, imagine for a second that chapter 1 is after chapter 12, okay? Because chapter 1 deals with funeral. So if you were to set this book up chronologically, you would actually, the next chapter would be his funeral. Now, Tolstoy takes the funeral and puts it at the beginning to offset our expectations of Ivan. So when we're there in the funeral in chapter 1, let me actually go all the way back. When we're there in chapter 1, and this is the funeral, and they're talking, and the coworkers and the wife, we kind of get like, wow, nobody really cares. This guy must have been a jerk, right? Who was this Ivan Ilyich? Who is he, right? And we kind of see this. It offsets us as readers, because we're wondering about why it is that people are like this. Okay. I really hope that when I die and people are at my funeral, they're not talking about, oh my gosh, I hope I can get Mr. Cortes's job teaching high school English. I really hope that I'll be up for his promotion. I really hope I get his parking spot in the parking lot at school, right? Like, that's what I hope they're not saying that. I hope they are saying good things, maybe. I don't know. But in that regard, you have to understand that it's put here for a purpose. Chapter 1 is put here for a purpose. So our ideas are skewed. So when we go into Ivan, we can see how life really is. We can see the Russian culture. We can see the demand for what society puts on us and pressures in us. Okay. If we got to the end of chapter 12 and then we had the funeral, we would kind of be like, well, yeah, that's how life is. But now that we understand that Ivan came to the conclusion that he lived his life improperly, had he lived it correctly, as we saw in these chapters, we get a different perspective. Okay. So this concludes our novel. I hope you loved it. Those last chapters are just really, really detailed. And I always, every time I reread it, that's where I just pick up and I push everything aside because I just want to kind of get to the end because it rolls on so quickly. But this is a great novel. I hope you enjoyed it. We are going to be writing a analytical paragraph about one of these components. So we're going to piece those things together. You have the opportunity to write about morality, propriety, Gerasim, or the concept of sickness and death. I'll give some more instruction and give another video lecture about that. But for the most part, I hope you enjoyed these last couple chapters of The Death of Ivan Ilyich. It's a great novel. It's a great story. And I hope there's application for your own life where you get to sit and say, am I living the best life that I should? Am I going to look back on my life when I'm resting on my deathbed and say, I lived a good life, or no, I did not live a good life? Like, it helps us to put things in perspective to make the best possible choices that we can. Okay. Anyway, hope you loved it. I love it. Talk to you guys soon.